Welcome to the referendum debate. It's now less than 5 months until Scotland has to make up its mind. We're here in Kirkwall on Orkney to see if our panel and audience can help the nation reach its biggest ever decision. On our panel tonight, one elected politician and one campaigner from each side of the debate. The Scottish Government Minister for Youth Employment, Angela Constance MSP. Also backing the yes vote tonight is broadcaster and journalist Lesley Riddoch. Supporting the Union are former Labour MP and former UK Energy Minister Brian Wilson. And from just up the road, the Scottish Secretary and Shetland and Orkney MP, Alistair Carmichael. Welcome to Kirkwall. The Light of the North, St Magnus Cathedral, the most northerly in Britain. Founded by the saint's nephew to win Orcadian hearts in a power struggle for the islands, nearly 900 years later, the result of this political piety still dominates the Kirkwall skyline. The Norsemen who ruled this archipelago until the 15th century left their mark in other ways too. But the biggest influence on these exposed sandstone islands was wind, wave and tide. Today, islanders are turning the tables and trying to harness that power. Orkney is at the heart of efforts to produce renewable energy. It's the latest plan for a people who like to make their own decisions. Orkney feels a long way from London and Edinburgh. Well, as ever, our audience tonight are an even mix of those for and against independence, plus a large minority who are undecided. And if you want to join the debate at home, our Twitter hashtag is BBCIndieRef, and you can text us on 80295. Now, our Kirkwall audience here have submitted their questions, and as usual, our panellists have not seen them. So our first question this evening is from Lesley Berger. Lesley Berger.
Would Scottish independence be cataclysmic for the Western world?
It's a reference to Lord George Robertson, former Secretary-General of NATO's quote that it would be cataclysmic. Would it be, Alistair Carmichael?
Well, I don't think that's a term I would have used myself, but I think we have to be realistic and recognise that, in fact, this is our decision to take as Scots. You know, we said right at the start that this was a referendum that would be made in Scotland, to be decided by the people in Scotland. Let's not ignore the fact, though, that it will have repercussions for people both in the rest of the United Kingdom and, in fact, in other parts of Europe and the Western world as well. If you consider, for example, the question about EU membership, it is pretty clear that a lot of the members of the European Union currently have got parts of their countries that are looking also to secede. Okay. So they will be looking very carefully at what we do in Scotland, and they will have a view in it should we vote to be independent.
I think what he was referring to, though, was really the global power balance. Is he simply wrong to say it would be cataclysmic in geopolitical terms, that it would be a torrid, complex, difficult and debilitating divorce, that the forces of darkness would simply love it? Is that wrong?
It would be a very difficult disengagement. We know
is that kind of language sensible?
The truth of the matter is that, you know, the United Kingdom is not just any country. We are one of the leading countries on the world stage. We have the world's second largest international aid budget. We are a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. And when you start to unpick a nation that has a position like that on the world stage, then yes, people will look at it carefully and they will be following the debate very carefully.
Angela Constance, cataclysmic?
I think George Robertson's comments were completely and utterly just over the top. I mean, for the first time when I heard his comments, I thought he was talking about some Star Wars film about, you know, the battle between good and evil. But a more serious point is actually, I don't think his comments, and it's very sad because he, you know, used to represent a Scottish constituency, but his comments don't reflect well on Scotland, or indeed the rest of the UK. I mean, you know, we have a civic nationalist movement in Scotland. We have the Edinburgh Agreement, where both the UK government and the Scottish government have worked together and will agree whatever the outcome of the referendum is. We have a peaceful democratic process, the most exciting debate that's taken place about Scotland's future. And I just think George Robertson's comments were over the top, out of touch, and actually don't portray Scotland or the rest of the UK in a good light. And that has to be regretted, because people on both sides of the border respect the wishes of each other. And, you know, I believe in independence for many, many reasons, but it's because I want to do good at home and abroad. And I believe in the power and influence of small nations working together, not just to make Scotland a better place, but the world that we all live in and the world that we share a far better, more peaceful and more prosperous place.
All right, Brian Wilson.
Well, I was in the United States last week, and I didn't find much sign of a cataclysm in people's responses. I mean, what I did find was puzzlement. I think there was a genuine puzzlement. Anyone who'd heard of it, which would be a small minority of Americans, you know, the obvious question is why? Why is this going on? Why are you doing this? And people say, you know, is it about religion? No, it's not about religion. But you speak the same language. Yes, we speak the same language. Your economies must be very integrated. Yes, our economies are very integrated. So what's it about? And, you know, it's sort of fairly mirrored my own question, really, because there is so much that binds us together. And why are we doing this? Now, whether it's a cataclysm or whether I don't think we should get too hung up on a word. But as Alistair says, you know, I don't think on the one hand you can say this is a very big thing, on the other hand say it's a very small thing, as sometimes they try to sell to us that everything will go on as before. Everything won't go on as before. And a lot of people are watching this with great care. And the question of the EU, which George also touched on, is very significant, because every country virtually in Europe does have its own potential secessionist movements. And so when you get to the question of continuing EU membership, which is so important to this whole debate, so important to the fishing industry, for instance, yesterday, which expressed its doubt, so many industries, then why would, you've got to look at it not just from a Scottish point of view, why we would want to be continuing in the EU, you have to look at it from the point of view of other EU member states who say, well, what message is going to be sent out here if our secessionist movements can say, well, we leave one day and then we come back into the EU the next day, then that is major in its implications for these countries. So let's not exaggerate, but let's not understate either the interests that are at stake here, not just for Scotland, but for the rest of Europe as well. Right. And a lot of people are watching it for that reason.
OK, I'll take a few points. A few quick points and then we'll come down to Lesley Riddoch. So first of all, at the back, the man at the back.
George Robertson was, of course, talking about defence. Is a policy of losing Trident, getting rid of Trident and staying in NATO actually coherent, or is it just making policy by opinion poll?
OK, thank you very much. We'll come on to that, I think, in a moment. Let's come down here to the man in the second row. Yes.
The First Sea Lord has said today, I think, that the Navy will be greatly weakened by independence. Here in Orkney we have the great naval base of Scapa Flow. What I want to know is, will this be still available in an independent Scotland for the Royal Navy for the defence of Great Britain? OK, thank you. And the woman in the middle. Yes.
Is this not just the establishment clinging on to the last vestiges of an empire that's in decline and quickly heading towards its end, and the intemperate language that is being used is really quite pathetic. I mean, the truth is, it's not a cataclysm, it's a catalyst for positive change, not just in this country of Scotland, but for all other countries within the UK and to the wider world. And it's shameful, really, to bring in the EU debate into this, because both these unionist politicians on the panel know well that the secessionist argument is irrelevant in terms of renegotiation or accession. There are two clear routes, but no precedent.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, quite a bit to get into there, but Lesley Riddoch, just perhaps to come back for a moment to the question. I mean, do you agree with Lord Robertson's suggestion that it would be cataclysmic? I probably can guess your answer.
I worry for George. I really worry for him. You know, he had a thing a couple of months ago where he came out about a fear that Scotland would begin a balkanisation of Europe, and now we've got this cataclysm for the Western world. It's almost as if, you know, he's getting frightened of his own shadow. I just find this absolutely extraordinary. I mean, it made me think, actually, sometimes when you put fireworks out, you forget you've put them out and then they go off on their own. This seems to be what this is like now, because it's almost like a kind of lack of orchestration. There's been agreement, I think, by lots of commentators, even within Better Together, that that campaign has been overwhelmingly negative and been totally scaremongering. And after everyone's kind of agreed, well, OK, it would be good if you could be a bit more positive. Whoa, off goes George on one. And then, whoa, off goes Justine, can't even get her name
Greening.
right, Justine Greening on one, about international aid, when, as somebody I think has already mentioned, we are way behind Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Luxembourg and Ireland in the amount of aid we give. So it's not a cataclysm, and as has been suggested, you could look at it differently. We're going to have a peaceful, democratic resolution of a long-standing issue. However it's resolved, that's the right way to resolve it.
Alistair Carmichael, isn't the point here that this kind of language is exactly what your campaign for the Union had already, as Lesley says, decided to stop doing because it was counterproductive? I mean, whether or not you think it is cataclysmic, it's bad politics, is the argument from your point of view.
Well, I'll say this about the language, and it is unfortunate if we're sitting here talking about whether it's cataclysmic or not. Because, in fact, there are some really substantial, serious issues here.
But isn't that your fault and your side's fault in this argument? Isn't that the point?
It's not that long since the First Minister was in London telling people of London that they lived in the Dark Star, that he was talking about the rest of the United Kingdom having thieved Scotland's oil. So, you know, there has been intemperate language on both sides in this debate, and frankly, it doesn't really help us have the sort of debate that we need and that, in fact, Scotland deserves.
OK, thank you. Brian Wilson, I mean, do you agree with that? And I do want to stick to the question, which is about Lord Robertson's comments, that these are damaging the campaign for the Union.
Well, I mean, George can speak to his own comments, but on the wider point, he's always stuck with negatives and positives. I mean, I think it's largely a word game. I mean, you know, that one man's or one woman's negative is another's positive. I mean, I'm incredibly positive about all the things that have conditioned my lifetime, have given me my lifetime opportunities. The National Health Service, the welfare state, the clearance of slum housing, the comprehensive education, university education, of which I was certainly the first in my family. Now, all of these things I'm incredibly positive about, which were achieved by gradual reform in this country, and they were achieved not just for people in Scotland from my kind of background, but in every part of the United Kingdom. I'm incredibly positive about these things, and I don't want to see them broken up. On the other hand, I can think of nothing more negative than breaking up a small island into separate states in the second decade of the 21st century. So positive and negative can be played in both ways. And I just come back to the point about the First Sea Lord. I read that. I don't usually read articles by First Sea Lords, but I did today, and it's a very measured argument. It's not threatening anyone. It's not intimidating anyone. It's not about fear. It's making the statement of fact that there's a very closely integrated navy which has been built up over hundreds of years, and if you start breaking it up, then it's not just a case of dividing the ships, but there's jobs, there's training, there's procurement, there's bases, there's the fact that the Navy, it's not all about warfare, it's involved just now in the hunt for the Malaysian plane, it's involved in humanitarian work. You're breaking all that up between Scotland and what would be left of the United Kingdom.
Brian
Now,
Wilson.
is that positive? Is it negative? Does it matter? It's a subjective judgment whether it's a good thing to do and whether it's worth doing. I don't think it's a good thing to do. Others will disagree.
So Angela, Constance,
just briefly, if you would. I mean, isn't there a point here that no matter what your opponents say, you just simply say it's negative and dismiss it rather than engaging in debate?
Well, actually, I mean, I think the
the
track record of the No campaign on Project Fear is their terminology, and most certainly not mine. No, it is. No, it is. That's what the No campaign says.
I think it's a term you've tried to pin.
Could I address some of the points of debate that have indeed been erased? Brian mentioned the welfare state.
We're talking about defence at the moment, so that's it's considerably off topic. Let's talk about defence. Give me a defence.
The welfare state's been dismantled.
No, we're not talking about the welfare state. Angela Constance,
protected by the Scottish Parliament.
We're talking.
And a fact about defence is that it's this UK government and it's Philip Hammond who's come to Scotland and whose, I have to say, hypocrisy is breathtaking when he has absolutely slashed conventional spending, including naval resources in this country. 10,000 jobs, military of defence jobs, have been lost in Scotland. Nearly 40% of the defence cuts have taken place in Scotland. And then Philip Hammond does a wee flying visit. I've heard the phrase Tory tourist minister, won't even stay for a proper debate, comes up, gives us a lecture about defence, and, you know, perhaps he should be apologising to the armed forces who, whilst, you know, serving their country, have been given redundancy notices.
Thank you very much indeed, Angela.
I would need to deal with Sandra Kerr's point about NATO and Trident.
I wasn't going to, but you've not left us much option. Very, very quickly.
The question has been asked. And it's a perfectly legitimate question.
Well, do it in 20 seconds.
The White Paper tells us that an independent Scotland is to be part of NATO. Part of being in NATO is that you have to accept what they call the strategic nuclear concept. Now, at the same time, we're being told in the White Paper that we will not have Trident, we will have no nuclear weapons. So basically, what we're now being headed towards, and this is actually in the White Paper, a situation where actually the compromise will be, the rather messy compromise will be, that Scotland may well have nuclear weapons within our territorial waters, but that's okay as long as nobody tells us. It's a new take on don't ask, don't tell.
Only three countries in NATO out of 28 currently have nuclear weapons.
No, we're leaving it there. Thank you very much. We've got to move on. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Is for a nuclear-free world.
Thank you very much, Angela Constance. Thank you. Right, we're going to move on. We're going to move on to the next question, because otherwise we'll only talk about one thing all night, and that's not good. So we'll go to Meg Telfer. Meg Telfer has our next question.
Right. Will Nicola Sturgeon's call to the Labour Party, the Scottish Labour Party, to reclaim its roots fall on deaf ears?
Well, best put that to Brian Wilson.
Well, you know, you take your pick. You go back just about a month, and there was a little video, it's well worth looking at, in which you see Alex Salmond snarling out in Holyrood, after independence, it will be Labour no more. And then you have Nicola Sturgeon say, like the spider to the fly, come into the parlour and we will reclaim your roots for you. Now, as far as I know, Nicola Sturgeon has spent her entire life denying and denigrating everything that Labour governments have ever achieved. Why on earth anyone should place their trust in Nicola Sturgeon to seek the soul of the Labour Party, I don't know. But what, in fact, in fact, you know, I suppose at a very superficial level it might dupe some people, but if you look at it, it is complete nonsense, because what it does is, one, it would create in the rest of the United Kingdom the probability of permanent right-wing government, certainly more right-wing government than has been before. The nationalist objective is that, whether they get it or not, is that the rest of the United Kingdom would still be setting our interest rates, our financial parameters, would still be our financial masters, but it would be under a permanent Tory government.
Brian Wilson,
they would be hang on a second, they'd be setting the immigration policy, which Scotland, whether it liked, would have to write. So you'd have a more right-wing government in Scotland, and you wouldn't have a Labour government in Scotland, you'd have a nationalist government. Because what would happen would be, as happened in Ireland and has happened down to this day, that politics would continue to be divided along constitutional lines, and where you stood on the Constitution, rather than what I believe to be the natural divide in society, which is on the basis of social and economic interests. And that is what we're being lulled into, in which there's the false dichotomy of nationalism and independence versus, the identity politics versus those who oppose that kind of politics.
Lesley Riddoch.
Well, I guess that call to get back to the question, Meg's question, probably will fall on some deaf ears, because sadly, we are so divided. And I mean, this must surely be a kind of regret for everybody. We could probably agree on that, because in many respects, all of us on this panel here probably agree on far, far more than we would ever disagree upon. And yet, our politics doesn't reflect that. We now have a situation where we cannot really hear one another. We can't pick up examples, and I think we can't think larger than these islands. Now, since I wasn't able to say something about NATO, I'm going to try and weave this cunningly in, because it does actually have an impact on Labour. There's a much larger social democratic tradition in the small countries of Northern Europe than the one that we sit in and call Labour. Jens Stoltenberg, for example, who is the new head of NATO, was the Prime Minister of Norway. Now, that country has a very different outlook about nuclear weapons, for example. It doesn't have them. And yet, here is our new head of NATO as that kind of politician, and somebody who has seen the provision of welfare, the establishment of equality, the maintenance of social solidarity. I mean, words that we just think are a bit open-toed sandaled in this country these days. Those are the things that have put that country right to the top of practically every league table, and at the same time has made it a triple credit A rated country. So they're not doing too badly on the money front either. Now, to me, that's the kind of party I'd like to vote for. Do you call it Labour? Do you call it the SNP? I don't know. But that's what I'd like for this country. And I'd like a party that unashamedly espoused those values in whatever setup we end up with after September the 18th.
OK, thank you, Lesley. Please do put your hands up. Please get involved if you have a comment to make. Yep, I'll see some more hands. We'll come to you in just a moment. But first of all, Angela Constance, isn't Brian Wilson right? You have fought and battled and said anything to do down the Labour Party for years and years and years, and suddenly you're their best friends. What's going on?
Listen, I've known many people throughout my political life who've been very active in the Labour Party, who've been members of the Labour Party. Some of them I would consider friends, and some of those people come from backgrounds. I grew up in a West Lothian mining village. The issues that brought me into politics was the need for a Scottish Parliament, but a Scottish Parliament that could tackle issues such as unemployment. So I've always been very conscious that, particularly in terms of Labour voters, are people who I have, much in common with. But there are, of course, disagreements in terms of how best to achieve social justice. And what Nicola Sturgeon was saying at the weekend, and I think this is one of the most heartening things about the independence debate going on just now, is that the Yes campaign is inclusive, it's a broad church, it's people of all political parties and of none. And the most exciting thing about it, and politicians of all parties may or may not like this, is it's actually a grassroots campaign. And I've known that all my political life, when I've been champing doors in West Lothian, I've known that there's been high levels of support for independence amongst traditional Labour voters.
Well, let me just go back to Meg Telfer, who asked the question. Please keep your hands up if you want to contribute. Just keep your hands in the air, and we'll go back to Meg just briefly. What do you think is the answer to the question?
Oh, heavens. I agreed. I just agree with Lesley.
Yeah, I agree with Lesley. She's the new Nick Clegg. I agree with Meg. She does not take that as a compliment. We'll come to the woman with the glasses. The woman with the glasses in the middle and the blonde hair. Yes, yes.
I thought the yes and no campaign was about a nation voting for independence, not about a Labour Party or SNP or Conservative or whoever's going to be in control after September 18th. I thought this was about a country voting for what they want, not what party they want, because there's people in the Labour Party, Green Party, Conservative Party, SNP. Some vote yes, some vote no. This is about a nation, not about political parties.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, on that note, my question was around the fact that if it is a yes vote, will the SNP cease to be, given that they've completed their objective? I would like the panel to answer that question, please.
OK. You won't cease to be, will you, if there's a yes vote? In a word, I mean, very quickly.
No.
Good, thank you. Moving on. They say not. Yes, the man in the middle with the glasses, yes.
I just wanted to state that I think we would put more weight behind Brian Wilson's comments about, you know, having a right-wing government in the rest of the UK forevermore if we gain independence. If the Labour Party were putting a more effective opposition at Westminster. So I feel that they had the opportunity to vote out the bedroom tax some short while ago and they failed to do that. And quite a lot of Scottish Labour MPs didn't vote there.
OK, thank you. Alistair Carmichael, I mean, isn't the point here, the point that Nicola Sturgeon was trying to make in her speech, is it not that if you do want to make a decision about your political future in independence, the people of Scotland get the government that they want, whether that's Labour or the SNP, you have to be independent to be guaranteed, for that to be guaranteed.
Let's be quite clear what Nicola was doing here. I mean, she has identified that in order to get a majority for independence, then she is going to have to speak to and get people who are traditionally opposed to her party, and it was a fairly naked and cynical pitch
well, it's pretty obvious that she has to do that.
It's not for me to give advice to the Labour Party, but if I were, I think I would probably say beware of Scottish nationalists bearing gifts of traditional socialism, because, you know, it is a pretty cynical pitch at that.
It isn't the thing that it's working, though. Alistair Carmichael, would you not say it's working when you see the polls time?
Well, no, you see the polls, and those who want to remain part of the United Kingdom are still comfortably ahead. And in fact, the only poll that really matters, though, is the one that we will have on the 18th of September. But I'm interested in some of what Lesley was saying about social democratic values, because that certainly has been what has been reflected in Scottish voting patterns in recent years, and that is a reflection of the fact that we have a particular range of social issues and challenges in Scotland. These are the same challenges, though, that are shared by many people in Liverpool, in Newcastle, in Manchester, in Cardiff, and Belfast. And, you know, if you want to meet these challenges, you don't meet the challenges just by drawing a line in the map and turning your back on these people. You meet these challenges by reaching out to them and making common cause with them. And in terms of the Nordic experience, you know, yes, there is a tremendous amount that is absolutely fantastic and admirable in the Nordic social service provision model. I am a fan of a lot of it, but let's not kid ourselves that it's cheap. Denmark, for example, takes 47% of its nation's GDP in tax. In this country, it's 36%. Now, the question you want to ask is there the appetite to pay that level of taxation? And in Scotland, if you look at it, the one time when you have actually had that offered as a proposition was in 2003. Remember John Swinney and the SNP offering a penny for Scotland? It was the worst election result the SNP have had since devolution.
Say something here. I would love to know what you think of the Nordic countries. Would you like Scotland to have the best rates of child well-being in the world? Would you like us to have the best PISA education results? Would you like us to have these kind of things?
I love a lot of these things, Lesley, but the
they're
truth
too
of the matter
expensive for the seventh wealthiest country in the world.
The truth of the matter is, you asked the question, now let me answer it. The truth of the matter is that you can't just go around the world picking and mixing, taking bits from this country that you like and bits that you don't. The truth of the matter is that there is a whole package.
Whether you would like this country to have the standards of the Nordic countries.
You asked the question, now
You're
let
not
me finish
answering it.
The truth of the matter is that when, as a politician, I offer myself towards the electorate, as you did once upon a time, then you stand on a whole package. And it's not just about how you spend the money, it's about how you raise it. And that's why this is a legitimate question.
You haven't answered my question.
Let's have
Angela Constance and then Brian Wilson, briefly.
If it's the whole package, let's have a Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh that can fully mobilise its own resources of this rich nation of ours, and let's have control over both sides of the balance sheet. Let's have control over all the spending and all the raising of taxes, and let's have a government, the government that we vote for. Let's have a government that let's get the government that we vote for each and every time. I mean, 2/3 of my lifetime, I've had a UK government that Scotland, not that I just didn't vote for them, but that Scotland didn't vote for.
Right.
There's a democratic deficit in this country, and we need a parliament now more than ever that controls both sides of the balance sheet, instead of a UK government that's dismantling the welfare state.
OK, thank you. Brian Wilson, quickly, and then we're going to take a question that's related to this, so we'll move us on. But Brian, quickly.
3 quick points. 2/3 of the Scottish people didn't vote for your government, Angela. We live under it because we live in a democracy. Second point, you can't pick and mix. Get a common line. Of course, we could have Nordic standards of this, that, and the next thing, but we'd pay Nordic taxation. That's not what's in the. That's not what's in.
Lesley, it's embarrassing.
Lesley Riddoch, thank you both very much. Thank you both very much indeed. Thank you all very much. Please, there's no point. There is no point if everyone is going to shout over each other. I just want to say one thing quickly, then we'll take another question, and then we'll all speak one at a time. Thank you very much. Now, thank you. You can join tonight's debate. Don't forget, you can do it yourself. You'll probably not be as noisy as the panel, but you can use the hashtag BBCNDREF. You can also take part in a future programme if you want. We'll be in Portree on Skye on the 8th of July. On the 12th of August, we'll be in Inverness. And to apply to join the audience, you can go online and search for BBC Referendum Debate. And you can also email us referendumdebate@bbc.co.uk. And there are a selection of your comments on the BBC Scotland News website. Now, let's take another question, which comes this time from Sally Inkster. Sally Inkster.
Recent polls have shown that less than 1/3 of women support independence, and I wondered if the panellists would have a theory as to why that was.
Lesley Riddoch.
Well, I have to say a little bit of the experience here. I feel that it's very hard to get yourself heard when there's a lot of male voices around sometimes, and when you get shouted down. And when you're trying to open up perhaps a layer of the debate that hasn't been done before, I just wish we could get a bit further than the hackneyed responses that we often get. I think what women are used to is seeing a new boss same as the old boss. I think a lot of people are used to that. If you look at the history, throughout history, women, for example, spent 67 years in this country campaigning to get the vote. They finally got it in 1928. That was very late compared to some other countries. And there was huge hopes then about what that would mean. Actually, what it meant was that women's pay still remained at 40% of men's pay for decades. What it meant was, after the war, women had jobs and then were told basically to get out of them, to let men come back from the war and take those jobs again. All those times, women had been told that something different was going to happen, that a new deal was just round the corner, and you know, it kind of just never quite transpired. So I think all sorts of people are sceptical about big promises of change if one thing happens. I think that's probably fair enough, actually. But of all those people who are sceptical, I think women perhaps are the most sceptical, because quite what often happens with changes is that it's the same type of person that remains in charge. And the only point of having a change this time would be to create a different kind of society in Scotland, which is a much more egalitarian one, and in which women would have much more of a chance of equal participation. And the utter game changer that surely must come, whichever party wins, whichever vote, yes or no wins, and whichever party wins the next election. So we have to get childcare, affordable childcare, as an absolute benchmark of society in Scotland, because we're lagging so far behind. And I think women are watchful of that, wondering about the promise being allied to the independence vote, hopeful that it would come, but still needing a bit more persuading.
OK, so Angela Constance, you, congratulations, were promoted into the Scottish Cabinet this week in a move that some people have seen as not unrelated to the SNP's attempt to persuade more women to vote for independence. Ruth Davidson, for example, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, said it was a particularly cynical stunt, the very worst type of tokenism. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's absolutely imperative, given the economic climate, although there are some signs of economic recovery, it's absolutely imperative that young people and women and their place in work and their place in our economy, that those needs are represented at the very highest level of the Scottish Government. And the First Minister made the decision to appoint me and Shona Robertson to the Cabinet. And I think what he has demonstrated is that the Scottish Government can lead the way. We've set out in the White Paper that the Scotland that we seek will have a minimum of 40% representation of women in a whole host of companies and public boards.
So to come to Meg's question, just if I can relate that to Meg's question, because the question was, nonetheless, women seem to be lagging behind again and again in the polls, saying they would vote yes. One poll, for example, put support for independence at just 28.5% and falling. So why do you think that is?
Well, I think the most recent polls that I've seen had shown that support for independence amongst women was actually rising.
Well,
now,
nonetheless, it's low. Why? Why is the
I was just going to say, James, nonetheless, we need to do more, because women are 52% of the population. They've got absolutely every right for their interests, their needs, their aspirations
but the question,
to be
which I don't
fully
think we're
represented
getting
and
towards,
engaged.
is why do you think they're not?
Well, I think it's often about the practicalities of life, irrespective of whether you're a woman who stays at home to look after your children or whether you're a working mother. Quite often you've got quite a lot on your plate as it is in terms of childcare. We know the barriers that women face in terms of accessing affordable, high-quality childcare, which is the biggest barrier to women actually getting into work. And that's why the independence debate and the focus that we are now having, for the first time ever, we are now having a real debate about the provision of universal childcare in this country.
So, Meg,
and for the first time ever, we've got a plan to achieve universal childcare in Scotland within a generation.
My apologies. Sally, in fact, who I just gave you a wrong name to, which is my apology. Sally was shaking her head, who asked the question. Sally, and then if people, please contribute, put your hands up, keep them up. But Sally, why are we shaking your head?
I think it's actually the don't knows that are driving the statistic, and I think they're waiting for the grown-up conversation to start.
Well,
what do either of the gentlemen on the panel make of this?
Just to pick up Sally's point there, I'm very wary of this idea that people are sitting waiting for the debate, because frankly, if this debate is to be conducted solely between and amongst politicians, then it will be a pretty sterile and unproductive debate. This is a debate for a decision like no other that we will ever face. So, I mean, Sally, if you are sitting waiting for the debate to improve, and I have to say, in all the years I've known you, I've never known you to take that particular approach to a debate, then don't. Get out there, and if you don't like the tenor of the debate, then get involved and get stuck in and improve it. Why do women seem to be less enthusiastic about independence than others? That is a very difficult question for any man to answer and to come out with his life intact.
Nonetheless, the question's been put to you.
I have my suspicions, if I can put it like that. And that is that I think that women are more drawn to arguments of the head rather than the heart. Talking to people on the doorstep, I feel that women in particular are saying, well, what will this mean for me, for my household budget, for my children, for all the others?
Well, shall we ask a woman in the audience?
Can I just make the point now about childcare? Because this is important. And childcare is one of the most empowering and enabling services that a government can give to a woman wanting to go back into or for a father, indeed, yes, to go back into the workplace in particular. But this is something that the Scottish Government already has the power to do. It's something that has been done at Westminster. No, the point is that, in fact, already the situation south of the border is that for 3- and 4-year-olds you get 570 hours a year free childcare. In Scotland that's 475. And that's because the 7 years they've had to do it, they haven't done.
I really want to take some views from our audience. First of all, the women here, yes.
Personally, I find some of the policies insulting. I don't agree with there being certain percentages of women. If I get a job, I want it because I'm the best. No, I don't want to be a statistic. And I also disagree with the childcare policy, because obviously we want better childcare, but I'm sceptical about the figures. And when someone says we don't have the full figures yet, it's hard to kind of trust somebody and trust policy.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, you're just talking about arguments of the head and what's in it for me, and I'm just thinking, as a young woman, what's in it for me right now? I'm going to get paid less. I'm going to be excluded from things like education and good employment because of caring responsibilities, and there's no point sort of denying that, because in education even, women with caring responsibilities are excluded. I've got colleagues in the student movement who have been penalised because they've turned up to a lecture late, having notified that they were going to pick up their child. Universal childcare is absolutely essential. And I used to not be in favour in gender quotas, but now there's an absolute need for them because it's not happening. Women don't see themselves in those positions.
And do you think, in very short, do you think that independence would help or hinder that?
I think it would help it, because so far the last 200 years hasn't.
Okay, thank you. And the man up here.
The social policy that Brian Wilson mentioned about the NHS and welfare state, and also social policy to create better equality with women, the Westminster government seems to be charging away from that and going on a separatist move away from the rest of Europe, whereas Scotland is trying to remain as part of the more progressive states in Europe.
Yeah, Brian Wilson, this allegation that the Westminster coalition is dismantling the welfare state, I mean, presumably that wouldn't play well with women voters.
No, but devolution, I mean, the Labour government created a Scottish Parliament so that on many of these issues Scotland can do different things, which it does. But I want to go back to the question, why are more women resistant? Because I think women are better at recognising bluster and bad patter. And they're also maybe they're better at reading the book than looking in the crystal ball. And if you take something like childcare, women know, anybody with any sense knows that you don't need to change the constitution in order to build more nurseries. But as has been pointed out, when the Nationalists came into office, Scotland had a better level of childcare than the rest of UK, and a higher number of hours. We now have to catch up, because the money that has come to Scotland through the Barnett formula for childcare has not been used for that purpose. So to use childcare as a bargaining chip in the constitutional debate is very, very dishonest. And I'd give you another, the lady who spoke about students. There's an astonishing statistic that since 2007, the number of people going into further education colleges each year has dropped by 35%. There are 140,000 fewer people this year in further education colleges than there were in 2007.
Okay.
Now, hang on a second. And of that, because it is mostly part-time places that have gone, 93,000 of that 140,000 are women, because they, for the childcare reasons, that they are more likely to be in part-time courses. Why is a party and a government which is supposedly so concerned about the rights of women and their childcare and all the rest of it, why, Angela, why, and I'm sure you've got good intentions personally, but why have you cut 140,000 college places?
Well, we've not, because women are not underrepresented in our college sector. And what we've done...
93,000 fewer women.
You've made the point, but let her answer.
But we have more young people, and most of those young people are young women, doing full-time courses that lead to recognised qualifications that are going to boost their employment prospects. Women are not underrepresented in the college sector. Where they are underrepresented is in certain sectors of the economy, growth sectors of the economy, whether it's ICT, whether it's engineering, and we need to get more women into things like renewable energy. And that's why we need full economic control, and that's why we need full control over equality measures. But in terms of the childcare plan,
level 4 modern apprentices as well.
No, we've not. Higher level modern apprenticeships in Scotland are growing, and we've just had an announcement today that we're going to work towards 30,000 modern apprentices.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, if we could just park some of this for the moment, do we not want to move to a situation where we have a much more cooperative, consensual way of working? Do we want to dump competitive, backstabbing, driven kind of behaviour, which actually always puts the elite first and never puts the average person? Because that's the mark of the society that we're trying to create. And we wouldn't be sitting here, we just wouldn't, if we hadn't witnessed a change in what is characteristic of the values of the way that the UK operates, so that many of us watch, particularly Conservative conferences, as if we're watching aliens on another planet, actually. You know, we don't have 3-star hospitals here. They do south of the border. We don't have the opt-out academies. We don't have the belief that the market is the only dynamic that works in life. We're trying to do something different. And we have been, since Scots, for all sorts of reasons, voted Labour since the party's inception. It's been trying to express a different set of ideas. So the point is, those ideas, that consensual way of working, something that looks at where the average of the population is, not just the elite, which is the constant way that the UK seems to measure success, that's the kind of society most women want, particularly because they do well in consensual situations. So if you're looking at that kind of way forward, and that's part of the reason that personally I'll be voting yes, because I think that's the kind of society that is trying to get out in Scotland and is being put back in the box constantly by a completely top-down, competitive, driven market economy type of government in London.
We'll take a couple more points. Yes, the woman in the middle, yes.
We need a massive amount of money to turn around the poverty of aspiration among women and the material poverty that children face. That cannot be done with pocket money from the Westminster Government. It's a massive task, and it needs the full amount of economic levers that we need, that we can get from independence to do that.
Yes.
It's not just women who are waiting for a grown-up debate to start. I can assure you that it's men as well. And I'd like to thank Lesley for at least trying to get to a different level of debate. We're only having half a debate, which essentially is centred around an SNP manifesto following independence. We've not had any vision. We've had no idea of what might happen if other parties, not unreasonably, might be in charge of an independent Scotland. We've had a Lib Dem and Labour coalition before in the Scottish Parliament. We've had nothing from other parties to give a broad debate on both sides so we can actually think what might be the case in an independent Scotland.
Thank you very much. We'll take another question then. The next question is from Amy Liptrot. Amy Liptrot.
Would the future for the renewable energy industry be more secure in an independent Scotland?
Would the future for the renewables energy be more secure in an independent Scotland? Angela Constance.
Yes, absolutely. And at this current time, our renewable energy sector, I would argue, has been held back by some of the decisions that have been made by the Westminster Government. We know that energy costs have been rising over the past 15 years. In fact, household energy bills on average have risen by 50%. We know there is now growing concerns about the supply, the security of supply issues. And we have a wonderful opportunity in Scotland. We have a quarter of Europe's renewable energy capacity. Scotland currently is a net exporter of electricity. The lights in the rest of the UK would go out if it was not for Scotland exporting electricity. So we have a sector that is growing. Jobs and investment in renewable energy has increased over the last 3-year period. But there's no doubt about it, we need to be doing more. This is a huge opportunity for Scotland, and we need to be, now more than ever, very focused focused on the areas of our economy with that growth potential, and renewable energy is an excellent example of the future and the way forward for our economy.
I imagine people have views on renewable energy here in Orkney. Surely you do. Put your hands up and keep them up for a minute, and I'll come back to you in just a second. But Brian Wilson, of course, was an Energy Minister himself. What do you think? Would it be more secure?
Well, so much of what Angela said we could go on all night. But, you know, even my breath was taken away when she made it a virtue that we export a quarter of our electricity to the rest of the UK. We export a quarter of our electricity to the UK because we have 2 nuclear power stations at Hunterston and Turness, which you're going to close down. Now that's the first point. And the other thing about being held back by the rest of the UK, we have massive investment we have significant investment in renewable energy at the present time because it's paid for by consumers throughout the United Kingdom. And 90% of it is paid throughout the United Kingdom. £6 billion has been spent on creating the infrastructure, which I actually did have a hand in initiating for the whole of GB, so that we could export renewable energy to the rest of the UK. But if we do not have a single state and a single market, then the idea that consumers in the rest of Britain are going to continue to pay 90% in order to subsidise Scottish renewables is utterly delusional. It's not true. We have a fantastic facility in Orkney, which was created, again, when I was Energy Minister, as a joint thing between the United Kingdom Government and Highlands and Islands Enterprise. We should be promoting all of these things, but it's essential to the whole renewable thing is where Scotland can do a lot more in renewables, is that we have the market into which to sell that energy. Why, if you break it up into separate states, you break it into separate markets, and people in London certainly are not going to subsidise building cables to the Western Isles or to Orkney or to Shetland. Why would they? Because if we choose to make ourselves a foreign state, then we live with the consequences of making ourselves a foreign state.
I'd like to just go up. There's plenty of people with their hands up. Yes, the man with the hat. How could I miss you with your hat?
Yeah, this is quite a mess. I mean, we don't have an interconnector here, and Alistair Carmichael is a Lib Dem, and I only realised very short ago, I was slow on the uptake, I must say, that Ed Davies is a Lib Dem. So why does Fergus Ewan have to go appeal to Ed Davey for a connector when Alistair Carmichael sees him every day?
OK, we'll come down to Mr Carmichael in a minute, but just right in front of you. Yes, right in front of you.
I would like to see some of the renewables put back into the community rather than lots of people in Scotland making a fortune from it. I would like to see our pensioners get some of that free energy that's been given to some of the wealthy people who have got these turbines all over our island.
OK, thank you. And the man in purple, I suppose.
Okay. You mentioned about us not about connecting us to the grid. Well, we're not currently connected to the grid at the moment in Orkney here. Is that likely to happen if we stay in the UK?
OK. Thank you. We'll come down. Yes.
It's all on hold. Why are they going to spend hundreds of millions of pounds at the present time on these connections when we don't know whether in 2 or 3 years' time we'll be part of the same market or not?
Well, we'll go here. Yes. Well, I'd like to go to the woman here, and then this side of the panel. Angela Constance.
Aren't going to use
we'll come. This side of the panel haven't had a word at all. So I'd like to take the women here, and then we'll come to Lesley and Alistair. So the women here first of all.
Okay, I'll try and make 2 quick points.
I'm
a postgraduate renewable energy student here, and we're actually told that it's going to be 10 years before we get this connection made to Orkney, and it's not actually something that should be down to the referendum debate in September at all. The UK government and other SSC and Scottish Hydro are bound by Ofgem in order to make these decisions, and everybody's just pointing their fingers at each other as to who's going to take the responsibility to do it. My second point, in Orkney, 103% of the electricity was generated last year. That 3% equalled a loss of £3 million to the local community because we were unable to export this electricity. So I think this was a question I actually had written down as well as Amy. Absolutely, I think that in light of independence and it being an independent Scotland, it'll be much higher on the priority list to get peripheral areas linked up than it is currently.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Lesley Riddoch and then Alistair Carmichael.
Well, I came across some extraordinary figures from Eurostat which just came out last month, and they describe how much renewable energy is as a proportion of the whole energy mix for each country of the 28 who have agreed to have targets for 2020. And amazingly, the UK is third bottom with Malta and Luxembourg, producing only 4.2% renewable energy as part of its mix. The EU average is 14%. The best are Norway, sorry to keep mentioning them, folks, 64.5%, and quite a lot of the other nations are up around 40 or 50. Now, my question is simply this. If, in effect, the renewable energy industry is safe in the UK's hands, why are we bottom? Why has there been so little investment to get the show on the road? People will be aware that we have a phenomenal renewable resource. And I know there's arguments where people feel they don't like the aesthetics, they don't like looking at wind turbines, but you can't argue about the resource. We have probably, in Scotland, got one of the best renewable resources in the whole shebang, probably in the Northern Hemisphere. Now, we need to get this show on the road because also at the weekend, the International Panel on Climate Change came out and said that the world is warming at twice the previous rate, but that if we treble or quadruple renewable energy production, we can do something about it. Now, Scotland is sitting in a sweet space. We could be getting on with this if we could allow all the islands, Orkney, Shetland and the Western Isles to be connected. And to take the other lady's point up, absolutely, there should be community-based renewables, because that's the other reason there's been objections.
Shall we put some of these points to Alistair Carmichael then?
Right, there's an awful lot actually that Lesley says there that I agree with. I mean, I see a tremendous amount of potential in Scotland's islands in particular for the development of wave tidal power in addition to the wind power that we've already got. That's why, in fact, the government has brought what we call an island strike price, which is a higher level of subsidy for wind energy generated in the island communities. There's no reason why, in fact, that can't then be extended to wave and tidal power as these
you can't supply it to anybody.
No, just stick with me here, Lesley. This is important, and I realise it.
Please don't be patronising. That is patronising,
no,
Alistair.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it to sound patronising if it did. That wasn't my intention. The truth of the matter is, though, that we have got a tremendous resource here. The interconnector application is something that will come on. It is currently to be done
let's have a bet.
with
5 years.
It's just
5 years.
Is this part of your sensible debate? Are you going to let me finish what I'm saying?
I'm asking why not.
I'm telling you that Scottish and Southern Electricity, who are the people who have to make the needs-based case to Ofgem, are going ahead with that.
We're very
the question
nearly out
that
of time.
The question
very
that was
nearly
asked.
Out of time, so very quickly.
The question that was asked was one about the future of the industry. Now, the truth of the matter is that renewables are going to need a high level of subsidy for the foreseeable future in order to get them to realise the potential that they've got. That subsidy comes from bill payers across the whole of the United Kingdom. 28% of that money from bill payers across the United Kingdom comes to projects in Scotland.
I hear what you're
that
saying.
Is one of the
Thank you.
things from which we are being asked to walk away.
A very brief response from Angela Constance, please.
It's very interesting when the Westminster parties talk about subsidy, because the one subsidy that they never mention is the subsidy of North Sea oil going to the London Treasury.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid that's it. I'm sorry if you had your hands up and we didn't get to you, but thank you very much indeed for contributing to the debate. Our hour is up. The programme is now on a break until the next time, which is July the 8th. We'll be in Portree then on Skye, and then in August and September we'll be travelling throughout Scotland. We'll be starting in Inverness on August the 12th. And if you want to join our audience for any of our programmes, please go online and search for BBC Referendum Debate. But from Kirkwall in the Orkney Islands, good night.